Hey everyone, Tactics here, bringing you more Mythic Plus title key routes, where in this video I'm going to be going through a plus 26 Tyrannical Black Rookhold, kind of showing you what we did in this specific run and what some other groups are doing as well in keys all the way up to plus 30, some tips and tricks to help you handle both the trash pulls and the bosses here, and also some easy to miss strategies and tech used on those higher key levels to help you improve and push for that 0.1% title. I've already got a couple of these videos out over on my channel, and I'll be posting the rest of the dungeons for Season 3 over the next week or so be sure you do subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you know when those get posted. Otherwise, let's get into it here, where you will mostly see two different strategies to tackle the initial area of this dungeon. Personally, I'm not really sure which one I prefer yet, so let's talk about both of them. To start, this is going to be the strategy where we pull 0 mini bosses. So we're going to tap these 2 retainers on the left side here. These are the guys that need stops. And then I'm going to run across and do the whole first pull like you normally would. So you basically play this pull the same, just there's 2 extra retainers for you to get AoE stops on. And actually, speaking of AoE stops, there's a neat little weak aura you see here. Liquid Max was working on this weak aura. This is not that one. This is a one that's been made by a different community member. I'll link it down in the description below, but it basically puts your AoE stops in a rotation if the entire party has this weak aura. You can see what AoE stop is up next. Makes it simpler to do these large pulls that need these coordinated AoE stops, and you can change the priority on which one is selected. So it's pretty useful for some of these pulls. It's not useful across the board. It doesn't always work 100%, but for pulls like this, where these any type of CC can work on these mobs, and there's a lot of them that you want to get out, and they're not necessarily synced, it's nice to have this rotation and know who's next, that kind of deal. So that helps for these retainers, getting them in. You notice here I moved to the second area because there's only 1 kick in this first area, so I'll Avenger shield it, and then we have a range kick from the Evoker just to get it in, and then we have me soloing one of these interrupts. We have the Rogue, who's going to alternate between kicking and single target stunning, and then of course we have that AoE rotation on the retainers here. We are basically just nuking the Protector here. The Protector, of course, is going to get that big damage amp with Sacrifice Soul, and it's a little hard to move over these mobs. I'm going to try and move it as this guy dies because, of course, Sanguine. We just need to make sure that we are getting kicks on these mobs. See there, I'm going to save Avenger's Shield to kick whichever mob is in the Sanguine, and instead I use Hodge to stop my kick because I obviously don't have it available. Sanguine's going to start dropping again, so again, we're using interrupts, and we're maintaining this knockbacks here for these actual stops here. That's why we didn't quite use Blast Wave in our other knock there. We get some free knocks from the Evoker, and basically he'll just call when he's doing those free knocks, so we don't use additional knocks in our rotation. And boom, Sanguine drops and a stop comes out, so we just use that. And when there's only one, it's not a big deal. We can just magic dispel that away. Now we're going to be skipping the mini boss here. There's a few ways to do this. We're just going to Shroud. You can Invis Pot, whatever it is, right? Because the Protector's right here, and this guy is not like a CCable mob. So like a Misery into a Shadow Meld won't work. Keep that in mind. But the big thing is these mobs aren't actually attached to the mini boss whatsoever. So you can see I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to actually tag these mobs. And this is my mistake here. So I need to make sure I tag this Protector as well. And this is how we play this a little bit wrong. So we're going to pull these 3 bosses into boss. 3 trash mobs, sorry, into boss. We should have just left. We're going to be hitting this and kick them and whatever. We're going to be hitting this pack. It's a waste of time. We should have just left. Obviously, it would have been just me down here. I'm going to tap the 3 mobs, and we outrange the magic debuff and the kick, and they would have walked up on us in the boss room, and that would have been fine. We could have kicked them in. 1 magic debuff would have gone out, but it's not a big deal at all. So just keep that in mind. If you are going to pull these 3 mobs, and again, use single target abilities, taunts, that kind of thing to pull the 3 of them, and watch because the actual Protector isn't linked, so make sure you get him as well. Just to run into this room. Play the boss maybe like in this corner towards where they come in, just so you can get kicks and stuff, and maybe have their range and stuff over here again, so the range can step over, get a kick on this council or whatever. But just go into the boss room. Honestly, it's not a big deal whatsoever, and they'll walk in on top of you. The retainer might put 1 magic dot out, but it's not a big deal. And then you can play them on top of boss. Sanguine weak, of course, be careful. I'm going to move the boss away for the Sacrifice Soul. I don't even know if it affects him, honestly, but I just move out of the way anyways. And then we're just getting kicks on this counselor here. We have mostly me, but again, we have a kick rotation because there's only 1 kick on this guy anyway, so everyone else can throw in kicks, make sure no kicks go off. This starts to die, so I'm going to start to kite the boss away from the guys that are dying there. We use single target stuns. We kidney shot the counselor out there to deal with that sanguine away. And again, similarly, I'm going to hodge this retainer and move away again, away from these sanguine puddles, just to make sure the boss does not get any ticks of sanguine on him. Boom. So yeah, knockbacks, single target stuns, and moving the boss to avoid that sanguine. And now we're just kind of hitting this boss. There's not a lot to this boss. I'll show one intermission tip for you. 50%, the boss will go into intermission. We assign one mob that's going to get rooted by the evoker over there in the corner. He's going to root that mob, and we're just going to, kill these other ones here. Again, primarily hitting the boss when we can, but, any kind of single target stuns, slows, knockbacks, roots, as you can see there, to keep these mobs away. And because this one mob over here is CC'd, the boss is actually not going to finish his cast. I believe this triggers... Gosh, what is it? Is it 20% where he will auto trigger? Somewhere like that. So our root ends up expiring, and so we just end up killing it anyway. It's not a big deal. Boss doesn't really do anything. And then he'll trigger after this last one. I believe it's 20, maybe it's 15% where he auto triggers Soul Burst. Either way, you can perma-CC that if you want to get that 15%, and then you can keep it CC'd if you have like a roots, like a mass entanglement kind of thing. That's really useful if you have a druid. Otherwise, boss is not terribly difficult. Commit your defensives, your group defensives or whatever to that. Like, there's no reason to hold the defensive there. I think we use like our immunes. We use barrier, Zephyr. Like, why not? There's no other damage on this boss. So, do it. Then we get to the deviation and roots. So, when you kill this boss, there's 34 seconds of RP before this door opens. What some groups are doing is they're not doing that pull onto the boss that we just did. Instead, they'll skip that same mini boss because the glaive throws on higher keys are just, it's ridiculous. So you skip that mini boss. And instead, during this RP, you'll run to the left and you'll do a 3-pack with the interrupt mini boss. And that's particularly for Prot Paladin groups because they can have a Prot Paladin solo the mini boss interrupts and then everyone else kick the other mob. You can do it without a Prot Paladin though. Again, in Warriors, Prot Warriors and Vengeance Demon Hunters can do that. If you had a kick from your healer or another melee kick in your comp, you could do that as well. Not a big deal. Just want to make sure you're 100% kicking the mini boss and then spare kicks going into the other kick mob in that pack. And they're doing that during the RP and slowly dragging towards this area. It's a little slower in terms of like you're not here when the door opens usually. You're, anywhere from 10 to 30 seconds late, depending on Tyrannical, Fortified, and key level. So keep that in mind, and that's why we didn't end up doing that on a Tyrannical key, though potentially on Fortified key it could be worth. I'm still not sold on either, to be honest with you, and I think we did also play the trash on the mobs a little weird, like we were slow getting it to the boss, like I explained. So I think this one is slight edge currently for me, personally. But it also makes that first pull significantly more difficult and punishing. So maybe you don't want to do that on a fortified weak key. And besides, you have more time on a fortified key anyways. So, do that. Do with that what you will. Potentially, maybe you do this on Tyran and you do the mini boss play on Fort. But either way, it's fine. And then we get to the spider hallway here. Every tank's favorite area. And so how we do this is during the grouping, I'm going to spell ward myself to prevent the mobs from applying a dot to me. I'm going to go straight up the hallway to the very, very top. We're going to kill all the spiderlings, and then once all the spiderlings are dead, we go into the trash pack. Now, in terms of how we handle dispels, we always go healer dispel first. After the healer dispel is done, I'm going to dwarf myself, and then the healer dispel will go again. And then if there's still spiderlings, I will then be able to bubble taunt to clear my stacks once again, because my forbearance by that point will be gone. Now, that's how we do it as a Prot Paladin. Obviously, other tanks are going to have to handle this differently. Vengeance Demon Hunters don't have the ability to dwarf. They don't have the ability to immune themselves to prevent the debuff from applying. But notably, this debuff kind of acts a little weirdly with absorbs. I've noticed, I think some people have said, I haven't tested this personally, but some people have said if you have a Mistweaver bubble on the tank here, it also prevents the dot from applying. I don't know if that's true, but you'll notice actually something weird happens here. So I spell warding myself, and we're going all the way up to the top, making sure I'm picking up aggro on the way. Obviously, I'm still taking auto attack damage here, but I'm just not getting dots applied to me. Dropping Consecrate. I'm going to pull this 2-pack in as well. And then you'll notice here, I don't have an immune on me. I did pop my Absorb Trinket from Farak, my Farak Absorb Trinket. You'll notice I'm clearly getting hit here, but I'm getting 0 stacks. Absolutely 0 stacks. I'm also Avenger shielding and getting an Absorb shield. So something is weird with these mobs with Absorb shield. It appears that they have to actually deal damage to you to actually cause a dot to apply to you. So keep that in mind. If you have big Absorb shields available to you, if you have a Rock trinket, if you have a Mistweaver monk without a bubble, all those kinds of things will apparently stop this from applying to you. So that's an interesting piece of tech here to hopefully help tanks out. The Everbloom Absorb trinket as well is another option if you don't have the one I have, the Farok trinket. You can see now it's expiring, and you're going to see now this big spider is going to start applying stacks to me once if he actually ends up hitting me. Does he end up hitting me? Maybe I parried him. Either way, absorb trinkets, absorb effects in general seem to also act like immunities to the stacking of that spiderling dot. So keep that in mind. And we chain right into this as soon as the spiderlings are dead, like I mentioned. Just beware of Sanguine, of course. I'm keeping kicks on the Arcanist. We have our Rogue keeping stops on the spinner guy who just died there. And then in general, we have additional stops for these archers if needed, if they do a bad jump and start going through the group. But in general, like this, like we're just going to kind of walk beside them and let them channel, because the longer they are channeling that arrow barrage, the less shoots they do. And the real scary thing is when they are shooting. If they ever have 2 of them in a pull, for example, which happens later on, and they both shoot the same player, that person is in extreme danger. So especially on these higher keys, and especially on fortified keys, you actually really want these arrow barrages to channel to their full duration if it's not in a terrible spot. This is a perfect spot. Like, do not interrupt that arrow barrage, right? Because that is several seconds where you are not concerned whatsoever about getting shot by them. Now, this is the one Risen Companion pull. We are going to throw the defensive bag at this guy when he jumps. It's an 8-yard splash, so you need to make sure your party is 8 yards apart here. When this guy is jumping, again, cooldown timer on the nameplates there from Mirez, previously from Reload, but currently from Mirez. And in general, we're just doing kind of Sanguine management. I get stunned here, which is a little unfortunate, so the mobs bathe a little bit in the Sanguine. Just watch that. And we are nuking that Companion. As soon as it's dead, the danger is kind of over. In terms of how we're handling scouts, we have the Rogue soloing one, and then me as the Paladin soloing the other. I do have short Hodge here, which is why I can do that. So I'm using Hodge into my Blinding Light, into Hodge again to get 3 stops on the scouts. And usually on a Tyrannical key, they're going to be dead by that point. But if we ever need additional stops, I can always call for the Mage or the Evoker to assist with that if they didn't already get them. To group this pull, just walk right in between the archers and they will come in a couple steps. Of course, they are going to bounce out towards random player location, so make sure your range are in a little bit closer when you're fighting, especially a double archer pack, so they don't jump too far away from the group. Though in this case, it's not bad because they jump away from Sanguine puddles, which is nice. And so I'm just making sure I'm managing my Sanguine by keeping the mobs that are going to die before the archers away from the archers themselves. Now for the next pull, again, you're going to notice people are going to LOS around this pillar. I'm going to stand right here. The archers spawn right to my left and right. You'll see, boom, mini boss, archer left and right, scouts up here. So as long as I tap these scouts and drop a consecrate here, these mobs are again going to just move in. Again, the archers take a couple steps. Boom, easy grouping here. You don't need to have your entire group LOS around this. You just want people that aren't your tank to do that so they don't instantly get aggro and murdered by like a scout over here. As you could even be like right here and it would be fine. You just, again, someone getting aggro on this archer and causing this archer to walk away from the tank could be problematic, so just keep that in mind. But it groups them very, very easily here. That was a bit of a bad archer jump, so we do stop that one. But in general, again, we're handling these scouts the same because there's 2 of them. Our rogue is soloing one and I'm soloing the other, and I can call for help if I ever lack a stop. For example, right, we had that one just die. I think I used 1 stop on that one. In terms of bloodlusting in this dungeon, your second bloodlust is likely going to be on this pull. I think ours came up a little late. Yeah, see, ours, honestly, we could have pressed it. It wouldn't have been a great value lust, but I think we are at this key level. We're going fast enough where we're like, okay, we're gonna scuff a lust anyways, so might as well just hold it. But on the higher key levels where you're pushed to the timer, you kind of want to rip this bloodlust when you get it, and usually that's going to be on this pull, and sometimes even the pull previous to this one that spawns this pack. So keep that in mind. It's good to lust either of them anyways because they are double archer pulls anyway. So they're both decent lusts. So use lust on one of these 2 packs depending on when it comes up. We're going to use on boss because we're kind of flying, but to actually get your 4 lusts in the dungeon, you do kind of want to rip the second and the third one like on CD kind of, because that fourth bloodlust is not actually going to be near the end of the dungeon. Obviously, if you have bad timers, it's going to be in the second phase of that last boss, but a lot of people are lusting the first phase of the last boss, but we'll touch on that later. Here, not too much to talk about. Double archer pull again, but there's not a lot of else going on. Just watch. Don't let these sync up on the same person. What we can do is alternate individual stuns. Like he would kidney one of these. I'd wait for that to expire, and then I would hodge the other one, just so there's only one firing for like 12 seconds, right? Which is nice. But other than that, not too much to talk about. And then we go boss here. And we rip lust here because it's only 12 minutes when we get here. Not a big deal, but timer-wise, you know, it's likely going to be on the trash. I think we cleave this Brutal Glaive as well, so just make sure your range are kind of spread out. And how this functions here for the Dark Rush is the 3 players that are picked, we're basically going to go to one side or the other, kind of depending. If the healer ever gets picked, we go towards the healer side. Otherwise, if it's the other range that get picked, we'll go towards the other side. And I'm always going to move the boss as well, because there's 2 melee, me and the melee DPS, the rogue here, and it's a very high chance that one of us gets picked. And so I'm always going to move the boss, even if I don't get chosen. So I don't get chosen here by this first Dark Rush, but the rogue does. And so I'm going to move the boss anyways to the side of the room that we're going to be dropping this Dark Rush line on, so that the rogue still has melee uptime. And how this works is the boss will always target the next closest player of the selected one. So he's always going to target closest player, hit, in this case, the rogue, and then he'll look who's the next closest player. Boom. Next closest player. There's only one left. Boom. That's how it always functions. So if you have someone that's like here, and then another person that's here, and another person that's here, it's always going to make a big like triangle, and that's not ideal. So you always want to make sure the next closest player is off to the side. And boom, it's just a straight line along the edge of the room. Nice and easy. Healer didn't have to move. And ideally, again, he goes to the back of the room there because he got targeted by the glaive right after. You want to watch those overlaps. A glaive will go out right after one of these dashes a fair bit. You need to be prepared to either spread out or already be pre-spread, depending on who is targeted by that dash. I just keep kicks on the Arcanist here. Watch the Vanguard frontal. And make sure you aren't standing next to that gate when the actual ad phase starts. Otherwise, it's basically rinse and repeat from here. These glaives can be pretty dangerous. You notice here we use the Evoker Cleanse. Obviously, Dwarf debuff does work here. And actually, here's an example I was talking about. So here's where what you don't want to do. Here's the Dark Rush, where our Evoker actually takes a step too far back because our healer's kind of trapped in the middle, is not going to make it. He should have stayed right where he is now. Maybe I could have moved up a little bit more as well, and this would have caused the line to go boom and then around over here, which is definitely not as bad as it going boom up this way like it does, because he takes a step too far back, and then the healer is now the next closest person. So this is a bit weirder. Again, neither is a huge deal, but just something to keep in mind in terms of how the Dark Rush targeting actually does work. There is a second ad phase, by the way. If this boss ever gets to 100 energy, we actually skip it here on a 26 Iran, but on higher keys you are going to get it, and if you have less damage, obviously if you don't lust it, you are going to get it. But we kill it and the boss is at like 90 energy. So second phase does eventually happen, but it's just to rinse and repeat from there. And remember, the boss takes full damage during the intermission, so you want a full cleave off of the boss. Now, for this pull here, this pull gets weird on Sanguine. Who would have thought? It's also a very large pull, so the party stays back here, and I'm going to actually use Bop to group this pull. So I'm going to grab all this stuff up here, not worry about dying because I'm immune to physical damage, pull it back a little bit, and then I will call when I'm close and my bop has expired or going to expire. Hey, come in now. I instantly pop my Sentinel for big defense, and everyone comes in and we blast this pack. Again, another good use of this weak aura on this pack, but it's going to go a little weird here, as you're going to see, because we're going to get to the stage where we need to use knockbacks as stops. It's very weird with Sanguine, because I think like the prio targets, because our comp is very heavy prio damage comp, they're going to start dying early in this pack, and they're going to start sanguining, and these guys don't move very well when they're casting this drink potion that you have like a second to move them between stops, and it's just these Sanguine's going down. Sanguine healing is skyrocketing. Tricksters are starting to die. Sanguine healing is skyrocketing. They're casting in the Sanguine. We try and use a knock. It goes weird with Sanguine, basically. Without Sanguine, this pack is dead. It's just a little weird with Sanguine, so maybe something to keep in mind. This pack is a little long on Sanguine Week in particular. So, you know, just something to be aware of. Then we have to deal with like this nonsense where he's frontline spinning guys. Not ideal. This one goes way better because there's basically one less like 4 or 5 pack of the scavengers to deal with, and so it just kind of dies in your CC chain. But the first one, especially on Sanguine, is a little rough for sure. You can see here, I can just kind of sidestep out of it as mobs are moving in the 1 second I have, and because there's not nearly as much chaos and as many mobs that are casting that are staggered, you have much more time to move, and you just have much less of the Sanguine early on healing mobs up. So something to keep in mind running up here. We are going to skip the first 2 mobs of this area here. I think we're waiting. Oh, we got stuck in combat. We're waiting to get out of combat here, and then we're going. We should have a little bit closer. We don't have a great speed boost in our comp, right? There's no Druid Roar, totem, whatever like that. So we get pretty close to this. I think our mage has to actually invis it off because he's too close to it. So make sure you take a few steps forward before you actually do that shroud or invis. I think invis is longer anyway, so invis pot's fine. If you have invis pots there, and we just go through with 2 dominators. And again, we make a mistake here. We should have pulled these dominators on the boss as soon as the bats die. So you just AoE, kill these bats, and as soon as the bats are dead, pull these on the boss. Again, prop paladin, I'm soloing X. They're kick rotationing on star. And notice it's just kind of a waste of time to hit these 2, especially on a Tyrant week. Obviously, have to keep in mind for Sanguine, but it's not really a big deal. They're pretty easy to avoid. And then we get to Smash Spite, where basically, you know, we make this fight a whole lot easier by having a rogue in our comp. This is a fight a rogue is actually very, very useful in terms of reducing the party damage, but it's really not a huge deal because usually every comp has someone who's like very, very tanky, right? What the rogue does is he has evasion. Evasion makes him take 0 damage from the Hateful Gaze charge. It's basically an immunity, and because he gets CDR on evasion, he can evasion most of the charges in this boss fight, which is pretty nice. And the ones that he can't, usually I can just take, and as a tank I can go up to 2 stacks just fine, 3 stacks with an immunity potentially, but don't underestimate the 500% damage increase. Usually 2 stacks is kind of where you want to stop in terms of just taking the damage hit yourself, and if for that 2nd stack you want like a big CD. Outside of that, you're going to see the Earth-Shaking Stomp here. I wonder if we actually have the death here because we weren't prepared for it. Okay, no. That must have been Mass Barrier. Yeah, okay, so that was what a Mass Barrier Stomp looks like. But basically on this boss fight, you want some sort of defensive running on every single player for every single stomp, whether that's, you know, Zephyr Scales, Mass Barrier, Priest Barrier, or just a personal, because the stomps are the scary part of this fight, particularly if you have someone eating a Hateful Gaze just before a stomp. And that's really the only thing to keep in mind in terms of damage intake. Other than that, it's just about baiting these lines. You see now, of course, you know, if you watch from my previous videos, these lasers weren't always showing at the start of the season. That was been hotfixed now, so you can actually always see these lasers and where they're coming from. You can see here the positioning of these lasers to kind of slowly move across the side. You're going to see basically our laser positioning throughout this entire boss fight is trying to create as much space for us as possible. So using these lines along the edges of the room, you can see here the evoker, he's going to go down to this edge of the room, drop that laser there, boom, makes it a line across there, move out of it. I'm going to try and move now as well. I got a bit of a weird one because I have to tank the boss, but I'm slowly moving back here. Now I got another one, so I'm going to move back here. This one's going to go through the center of the room a little bit. It's not really much I can do about it, but I'm going to try and create as big a spot in this area as I possibly can. And again, like, the puddles themselves, you can see there, our priest was just AFK in the puddles. They don't really do a ton of damage. It's not a big deal. So you can step into them. Obviously, I don't recommend doing it right before a stomp. So keep that in mind. But in general, it's all about making sure you have space, making sure you have some sort of defensive running for the stomp. And tanks, I think, be aware. Did he get? Oh no, I'm just a block tank. So the energy. Let's talk about the energy real quick because a lot of people don't know how it works. Basically, he gains energy depending on how much damage he does to the tank. On a block tank, like a warrior or a paladin, he's going to gain energy insanely slow. Here's 3 energy at what? 10 seconds into the fight. Let's fast forward to where we were, right? We're like a minute and a half into the fight. He's at 17 energy because he got a big auto attack on me there when I'm not in my consecrate, right? So he is not really going to hit max energy. Yeah, he does not hit max energy on this 26 Black Rook hold. If you are not mitigating these auto attacks, though, you are going to have him gain energy very, very fast, and you will need a massive defensive for the 100 energy hit. So keep that in mind. Have like a thing scream at you if he gets like 90 energy. Very scary, and get ready to pop a defensive. The Haymaker. Super scary, but again, on a block tank, you never have to worry about it. On a bear, you shouldn't need to worry about it. It's just potentially on like a blood decay. Maybe you might get to that point. Potentially vengeance as well. And brewmaster, not 100% sure, but for any of the block tanks in a bear, you won't be facing it at all. And then in terms of other hateful gaze targets, if someone else has to soak it that isn't your tank or like an immunity, it's perfectly fine to eat one stack of the debuff as long as you pop a defensive, especially if you're going to take an Earthshaking Stomp. So just keep that in mind. You don't need to immune soak them. One stack is actually just fine, and technically you could rotate your entire party one stack, using a large personal each time. That's fine. It's not going to be the meta strategy, right? Especially if you have your rogue in your group, he's just going to be immuning them like you see there. The last two, he's just been evasioning, and then I soak 2 back-to-back, then he can soak a bunch with evasion again. So whatever you have in your comp, but that's not mandatory whatsoever, right? Most comps are doing this without a rogue, right? So you don't need the rogue whatsoever. You can do the tank taking too, and then you can do 1-in-1, or you can have immune soaks, like a nether walk works, like ice cold will work, right? That kind of thing. Even just a regular pain sup or whatever personal, not a big deal. Then we do the last trash pull here. We're going all the way up to the top. Again, I'm hitting these mobs all the way as I go up. Careful with your back a little bit here. I'm strafing to make sure they're not back hitting me and moving up the hill here. I pop Sentinel just to help me continue this grouping in a safe way. And the big thing here, coup de grace is backsteppable. You will want to, as a tank, backstep these coup de grace hits as often as you can. And so basically, I'm going to rotate around this room in a big circle, which is also going to help with Sanguine. It's a bit annoying with Consecration as a Paladin, but it is what it is. You can also technically stop it, but I think we use a lot of our stops to prevent some of these leaps instead, because that's just more valuable in terms of keeping the pack together. Less leaping makes it less dangerous for everyone at ranged, and of course, it keeps them together so you damage them much better. We don't get all of them. It's not like a huge priority to stop here, and be careful of the carpet because it hides the actual swirly of the stun. But in general, I'm just backstepping here as large coup de grace packs go out. One coup de grace I'm not really worried about, but there's like 5. I am backstepping away with that, and you see I take 0 damage. So that is what you want to do as a tank. Never get hit by multiple of these coup de grace at the same time. Just take a step back. You can see as soon as I outrange my Consecrate, I'm dropping a new one just to keep that DR. And now the Sanguine starts dropping as well, so I'm backstepping the mobs. I'm backstepping to avoid Sanguine. There's a lot of movement here. You're not going to get great Consecration uptime. It is what it is, but do what you can. Poor tier set bonus. I'm just going to start cutting out here just because I lost space in that room from Sanguine. And we're going to the... Oh, I got stunned at the end here. Boom. Yeah, this cubby you can't jump over. Oh, yeah, you can't jump over this, by the way, just so you know. Lust timings, a lot of people like to lust on pull here. We scuffed a lust, like I said, because we were just too fast in the middle area of this dungeon. Usually, like I mentioned, you'll want to be lusting relatively close to on CD on that like mini boss pull before second boss, or the pack before that even. Then once you get it again, you will lust again, which is usually around the bat pull you would do, maybe on Smash Spite, that kind of thing. And if it's on a high enough key level, you'll get it back up on this boss fight, depending on timings, right? It might be a little odd for you, but I think a lot of people have been choosing to Bloodlust on pull here just to get through this phase, because you're going to see the Shadow Bolts are tons of damage, right? There's one Shadow Bolt on our dragon there. Boom on the priest. That's what a Shadow Bolt looks like. So again, this is kind of a phase where you want to have general DR coverage or defensive coverage in some way, so that you actually can live a Shadow Bolt. Obviously, some classes like a Warlock can just like actively exist in this phase, and they don't need to ever pop a personal. They just need to make sure they're healed up for the next Shadow Bolt hit. I think probably mages or maybe even rogues are similar, but yeah, look at the rogue damage there. But some other classes do need to rotate through their defensives because they get one shot by a bolt otherwise. For example, I'm pretty sure Priest and Dragon on a higher key level would probably get to the point where they would get one shot. And so just getting through this phase ASAP by lusting and nuking the boss helps to actually make sure that you are in a safe spot, because this phase is much less difficult. You basically have a pretty large DR on this first Shadow Bolt volley, depending on your comp. So for us, it's not a big deal because I'm going to immune this first one. Mage has like Ice Cold. Rogue has Cloak. And this is the most important one because you don't have the buff yet. We have Zephyr as well. I don't think we need to commit all this. I think we probably can pull this back, and instead we can use it on overlaps that have the bugs out with the volley, because this is actually super scary having the bugs out with the volley. You can see how low our mage drops. I end up sacking him here as well. You can also bop these bugs off. If you have a paladin, you can bop the bugs off, which I think I do later on. But the bugs are really, really scary on High Tyrannical, in particular when they overlap with the Shadowbolt Volley, so that player's always in danger. Luckily, unlike the Soul Thorns in Waycrest Manor, you are actually able to sometimes cast abilities. You're not always stunned when you have the bugs on you, so you're able to cast defensives, which is nice. That's what you want to use personals on in this phase here. The Swarm goes out, super scary, but, you know, I think we end up killing these fine. You want to make sure you have damage for them as well, and we kill it before the volley goes up. So that's kind of the weird kind of overlap you want to make sure you have damage or defenses for, to make sure you're nuking those bugs ASAP, and then as soon as those bugs die in time, you should be able to kill this guy. I think most people are doing it on the higher hierarchies in 3 boss phases, so they have 2 intermission phases. But if you can skip an intermission phase, you do save a decent chunk of time, which is very, very nice. So something to keep in mind there. But that does wrap up this video walkthrough, guys. Hopefully you found it useful. And if you did, be sure to like and subscribe for more content like it, including videos just like this one for every other Season 3 dungeon, and first look videos for War Within as well, when that beta ends up dropping. A lot of stuff ready to go for the new expansion. Super hyped. If you have any questions at all about this dungeon, please do leave those down in the comments below, and I'll do my best to answer. Plus, don't forget to come stop by my Twitch channel at Tactics if you're looking for a tank POV for key pushing or mythic raiding. As always, big thank you to my supporters over on Patreon. It really does mean a lot to me. Otherwise, thanks everyone so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.